To get the best use out of this video, go back over my video on the major scale and you'll see why each key needs a different number of sharps or flats to make the sequence of intervals work, meaning that each key has a unique key signature. And then review the video on chords with sevenths, where you'll learn about the dominant-tonic relationship, and then you'll be in good shape to follow along. But first of all, what is the circle of fifths? Well, it's a diagram or a concept that helps to visualize all sorts of chord, scale, key, and note relationships. And yes, it's an actual circle. The circle divides up into 12, just like a clock. Now, I'm adding a keyboard just to make it easier to visualize things, but obviously you wouldn't normally see one in a circle of fifths diagram. Traditionally, we put C at the top of the circle, with the note a fifth higher next to it. G is a fifth higher than C, so let's put that in. Now we can just keep going around the circle, going up a fifth each time. Eventually we get back to the start again, having covered all 12 notes. A couple of little things before we go on. Take a look at the bottom of the circle where we have an F sharp and G flat. They're actually the same note, just said in two different ways. As we move clockwise around the circle, we'll start to see sharps, but then, as we'll see in a moment, we move into flats. For now, it's enough to know that the bottom note can be written either as a flat or a sharp. The other thing to mention is that as long as we move clockwise, we're going up in fifths. But if we go anti-clockwise, we're actually going up in fourths, which is exactly the same thing as going down in fifths. D is the fourth of A, and G is the fourth of D, and so on. For this reason, you'll sometimes see the circle of fifths called the cycle of fourths. It's the same concept with a different name. One of the commonest uses of the circle of fifths is to display the various key signatures in order of the number of sharps or flats they use. Some of the keys towards the bottom of the circle are often called one of two different names. As I mentioned, F sharp and G flat are actually the same note. They are said to be enharmonic equivalents. Likewise, D flat, which could also be called C sharp. As we look at the different key signatures, you'll see that we can use these enharmonic equivalents to make life easier for ourselves. Anyway, on the right side, we find the keys that use sharps in their key signature, starting with G major, which has one sharp, through D major with two sharps, and so on, down as far as F sharp major with 6 sharps. And by the way, if we thought of F sharp major as G flat major, it would have 6 flats instead of 6 sharps. Now we could carry on with sharps, and the next key would be C sharp major with 7 sharps, meaning that every note is sharpened. But it makes sense to start thinking in flats now instead, because D flat, which is the same note as C sharp, uses 5 flats, so it's a bit less unwieldy than the 7 sharps of C sharp major. And as we keep moving around, the number of flats continues to decrease until we get back to C major, which has no sharps or flats. So now you can see that every key is written out in order of the number of sharps or flats in the key signature, starting from the top and working in order down to the bottom of the circle. Remember, these note names could represent keys, chords, or simply notes. If we look at them as notes arranged in fifths, it's easy to see the dominant-tonic relationship. Wherever you are on the circle, chord 5 is one step further clockwise than chord 1. Chord 5 of A, for example, is E. Chord 5 of B flat is F, and so on. And taking this idea just a little further, choose your chord 1 and you'll see that chords 4 and 5 are either side. In the key of D, for example, chord 4 is G and chord 5 is A. Here's another application. If you need help visualising or remembering tritone pairs, that is to say pairs of notes a tritone away, then just choose any two notes opposite each other, E flat and A, for example, or B and F. We won't look at this too deeply here, but in popular music and especially in jazz, it's really common for chord progressions to follow the circle of fifths. You'll hear about 2-5-1s and 1-6-2-5s and so on. And the circle of fifths shows you exactly what the root notes of these chords should be. Here's a 2-5-1 in G. Chord 2 is A minor 7, chord 5 is D7, and chord 1 is G major 7. As you can see, these chords just move around the circle step by step. To finish up, here are a few simple geometric patterns. Plotting a square on the circle of fifths will give you a diminished chord. An equilateral triangle gives you an augmented triad. And this is how a chromatic scale looks. Eventually you'll memorise the whole of the circle of fifths, but if you're just starting out, try getting to grips with the top section from maybe F around to A, since beginner musicians tend to stick to these keys. Soon you'll start adding to your knowledge and extend in both directions, and before long you'll be able to go right around the entire circle. If you're practicing scales, arpeggios, or any technical exercises on your instrument, you might try following the circle of fifths to make your practice more challenging. Start in an easy key and move gradually around. The more of this sort of thing you do, the easier it becomes, and eventually those far-off exotic keys around the bottom of the circle won't seem nearly so daunting.